Chapter 336. He did not expect Matt to be backing James. Things were getting interesting to him. Matt looked in the direction where the bodyguard was going and was suddenly stunned. Isn't that Mr. Penn? Why is he here? Did James say he was going to handle him too? Matt wondered. Matt was too shocked to react. The bodyguard was already in front of Reggie and Wilbur. Reggie was scared out of his wits a long time ago. Declan ran away with his tail between his legs, and Wade caved in. He was requested to lick James' shoe clean, and he had to endure it. As Wade's sidekick, Reggie felt that he would end up with a fate worse than Wade's. I'm doomed. I organized this get-together, but I failed and even embarrassed Wade in the process. I'm going to lose my job after this. The scariest part was he had no idea what James was going to do to him. His bodyguards knew how to fight and easily defeated over 20 men. Reggie was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Meanwhile, Wilbur told the bodyguard who was walking towards them in a nonchalant tone, "We'll walk there ourselves. There's no need to trouble you." Wilbur got out of the golf cart and walked toward James. Reggie was so cowardly that he could not walk. The bodyguard yelled, "Go! Do you want to die?" I'll go. I'll go." Reggie had a troubled look on his face as he followed behind Wilbur. He felt extremely anxious. Matt snapped out of it at that moment. He jogged toward Wilbur and bowed to greet him. He said, "I didn't know you were here, sir. I'm sorry for my manners." That instantly stunned everyone. Wade was in disbelief. He looked at Matt, who was bowing to Wilbur and did not dare to stand up straight. Wade felt like his jaw was going to hit the floor. That was Matt Lilith, the head of the Lilith clan. The Lilith clan was one of 3 major clans in Town. Their net worth totaled tens of billions. Some of their members were even district officials, and Matt himself was a mafia boss. Why would he be bowing to the irrelevant guy who did not even have a job? Why was he being so respectful? James was stunned too. He knew Matt and his noble status in Town. Matt was able to scare off Declan with only a few words, and that showed his authority. Who the hell was this guy to make Matt bow down to him so respectfully? Reggie was more dumbfounded than anyone. He could not believe it. The 3 girls were flabbergasted too as they watched Wilbur with a puzzled look. Matt had the greatest status among them, so they could not believe that Matt was bowing down to Wilbur. What the hell was going on? Nancy sighed deeply too. She wondered how many identities Wilbur had and how much power he truly possessed. She could not figure him out at all. Wilbur looked at Matt, who was still bowing. He frowned and asked, "What are you and James up to?" "Sir, we are collaborating on a project. We only got to know each other recently," replied Matt in a respectful tone. Wilbur said nonchalantly, "I'm not against your business, but I dislike James' way of doing things." "Sir, I'll terminate the collaboration with him immediately," said Matt. Wilbur scoffed and said, "Go to Faye if you need the money." "Do you think she won't give you the money? Why do you need to work with outsiders?" "Yes, of course. I just didn't dare to trouble you and Miss Eve, sir. I know what to do now." A drop of sweat rolled down his forehead. Wilbur glanced at Matt and said, "Tell him to come over here. I have something to say to him." "Yes, sir." Matt immediately got up and walked toward James. He said coldly, "James Chook, he wants you to go over there." Chapter 337. He said that in a very unfriendly way. James was taken aback at first. Then he said coldly, "Mr. Lilith, don't forget that we're business partners. I'm not your subordinate." "How dare you? Do you want to do this the hard way?" Matt instantly flipped out on him. He grabbed James and tossed him over to Wilbur. The bodyguards were shocked, and they immediately sprinted over. Matt did not hesitate to use his aura. The bodyguards were on the ground and coughing up blood after a few moves. James was dumbfounded. He did not expect Matt to turn on him at all and did so with such determination. Matt even injured both his bodyguards without showing him any respect. He knew right then why Matt was crowned the mafia boss of Town. His bodyguards were no match for him. However, the scary one was the young man in front of him. Matt bowed to him in a respectful way and called him sir. He could not imagine who he was. Matt looked at James, who was on the ground, and said coldly, "You better watch your tongue. I'll spare your life if he's satisfied with your answers. I'll scatter your ashes if you dare to upset him." James was rich, but he got rich from coal mines. He was a typical nouveau rich with no significant family inheritance. He was only an ordinary person. He dominated Woodstown because of his wealth and the bodyguards he hired. Woodstown was just a small city. There was nothing that could be developed except for coal mines, which was why he arrived at Seachertown. He was looking for business collaborations. He felt like it was a shot in the dark. After all, it would be difficult for him to conduct business here without collaborations. He did not expect the reliable business partner he just found to turn into the bane of his existence in the blink of an eye. James finally understood fear because he was overpowered by the overwhelming mafia boss. He nodded obediently and did not dare to be arrogant again. Wilbur chuckled and told James, "I welcome you to Seachertown for business, but you don't have what it takes to dominate Seachertown." "Yes, of course. I get it now, bro." James realized the situation and did not dare to talk smack. Wilbur scoffed softly at his attitude. He said, "Get out of Seachertown and never come back. Am I being clear enough?" "Yes, loud and clear," replied James hurriedly. Matt said in a low voice, "He's generous and forgiving. Why don't you get out of here now?" "No problem, I will. I'll get out of here right away." James hurriedly crawled up and fled, leaving his bodyguards behind. His bodyguards noticed that and struggled to get up. They followed closely behind James and left. They did not have the courage to look back at Matt and Wilbur. Wilbur told Matt, "Making money is important, especially when you have a lot of mouths to feed. I understand it's not easy to make a living." "Thanks for understanding, sir," said Matt hurriedly. Wilbur continued to say, "But remember, don't make money by betraying your conscience. Don't get involved in those dark deeds. You can't afford to bear the consequences if I find out." "I'll remember that, sir," said Matt while he bowed. The golf course owner, the manager, Reggie, and the three girls stood at the side dumbfoundedly. They watched Wilbur scold Matt with puzzled looks on their faces. Everyone knew Matt was someone so powerful that he scared Declan off just like that, then defeated James and his bodyguards in the blink of an eye. However, Wilbur was scolding him like a child, and Matt also seemed respectful with no trace of anger or annoyance. Just who the hell was Wilbur? Was he really just an unemployed person? Reggie and the girls started to suspect his identity, and they were afraid. Nancy approached them and asked Wilbur, "Is everything all right? Shall we go back?" "Yeah." Wilbur nodded. Then he walked towards Reggie and the girls. He smiled and said, "I just so happen to know Mr. Lilith. He's only being friendly for my sake. Don't look at me like that." However, they did not dare to engage in conversation with Wilbur, only daring to sneak a few glances at him. Wilbur sighed to himself. He did not want his classmates to speculate about his identity and cause any unnecessary trouble, so he kept things down low. However, it did not seem like he could hide it any longer. Chapter 338. Wilbur felt helpless. He patted Reggie on the shoulder and said, "Class president, you have changed too much." Then, he left with Nancy, walking away from the golf course. Matt looked at them and said coldly, "Anyone who speaks of what happened tonight will answer to me." Everyone looked startled before Matt left. Wade was jolted at that moment as if waking up from a dream. He looked around in a daze. He realized he was nothing. People like Declan, James, and Matt could take him down any time. The young man he looked down on turned out to be the scariest one. Even Matt bowed to show him respect and called him sir. Wade's ego was shattered in an instant. He then walked toward the exit dejectedly. Reggie and the girls looked at each other with bitter smiles on their faces. Wilbur claimed that he just so happened to know Matt. Anyone could tell it was just an excuse. Matt was very respectful toward Wilbur, which meant Wilbur was far superior to Matt. They could not believe they were so naive to think that Wilbur was an unemployed bum. They wanted to slap themselves at the thought of that. In the end, they left the golf course plagued with regretful thoughts. It was at that moment that the golf course owner and the manager finally sighed in relief. That was so scary. Who the hell was that guy? "I can't believe Mr. Lilith treated him so respectfully," said the manager with lingering fear. The owner, Zach, frowned and said, "Don't ask around to find out. Some things are better left untouched. But remember, welcome him and greet him if he ever comes here again. You also have to inform me immediately." "Yes, sir," said the manager. Wilbur and Nancy strolled out of the golf course and arrived at the roadside. A taxi drove toward them, so Wilbur waved for it to pull over. He said, "I'll send you home." "All right." Nancy nodded and they got into the taxi. She gave the driver her address and he drove toward her house. They did not speak on the way there because she did not know what to say. Wilbur had been nice to her, but she felt like they were drifting further apart. It was not like the first time they ran into each other at the market. They were free and happy back then. A little over 10 minutes later, they arrived at the entrance of her apartment. Wilbur watched her get out of the car and they waved goodbye. Wilbur then told the driver to head toward Sea Lake Island. The driver said, "Please pay for this ride first." Wilbur thought it was strange, but he asked anyway. "How much for this one?" "I'll transfer it to you." $300, replied the driver. Wilbur was taken aback. The distance from the golf course was less than 20 miles. Even $50 would be considered expensive already. Why did the driver ask for $300? "That's not right." "Is it now?" asked Wilbur. The driver instantly said, "Check the meter. It's 305, but I'm only charging you 300. You're already getting a discount." "Are you kidding me?" said Wilbur without thinking. It was not about the money. The driver was clearly trying to scam him. Chapter 339. The driver instantly became aggressive. He said, "Pay up. You can't take a ride without paying." The driver was cunning. He had been roaming across Seatretown for years and knew the people who came out from the golf course were rich. Also, he could smell the alcohol coming from Wilbur, so he sneakily adjusted the meter. Moreover, he could tell those two were not married. They were probably dating. Usually in a situation where the guy was drunk, he would pay without caring about the amount. Even if they were sober, the guy would usually pretend to be generous in front of their girlfriends. They would pay up to avoid unnecessary trouble too. It was not the first time he had done this kind of scam. He basically had everything covered. However, Wilbur was not drunk at all. The price was absurdly high, and he did not want to be treated as a fool, so he asked the driver. He had no idea the driver would flip out on him. Wilbur was also annoyed by that. He looked at the driver and said, "Aren't you worried that I'll report you for doing that? You'll be fined." The driver instantly yelled, "Hey, are you trying to avoid payment? Watch it." "Are you threatening me?" asked Wilbur nonchalantly. The driver noticed that it was not working on Wilbur, so he instantly got out of the car and slammed the door. He yelled at Wilbur, "Get out right now." The driver noticed his usual trick was not working, so he was about to act like a gangster on him. It was one of his tricks too. Nancy, who was about to go upstairs, noticed something was wrong, so she hurriedly turned back. Wilbur got out of the car. Nancy asked, "What's going on?" "This guy is trying to scam me by adjusting the meter. He's also trying to threaten me," said Wilbur while laughing. Nancy looked at the driver when she heard that, and she also felt at a loss on how to respond to the situation. Of all the people the driver could threaten, why did he have to threaten Wilbur? Could he even afford to threaten him? "Just accept the usual rate and leave quickly before you get yourself into trouble," Nancy tried to warn the driver. However, the driver was too stubborn to realize that. He said, "None of you are leaving without paying today." Wilbur was stunned. He had never met such an absurd driver before. "This is the first time I met a bold and conniving driver," Wilbur chuckled. The driver looked irritated and threatened, "I'm telling you that I'll call my bros if you don't pay up. The compensation for the delay and extra manpower will cost more than $300 by then." Wilbur was furious. He could not believe the driver was bold enough to threaten their safety. Wilbur wanted to beat him up on the spot. However, he remembered Nancy lived there and the driver knew her address. He wanted to avoid future trouble for her. He thought about it and said slowly, "Forget it. I won't argue with you. I'll pay you $300. Wilbur was about to make the transfer, but the driver sneered and said, "You wasted my time and it affects my business. It's $500 now. Don't push it." Nancy instantly tried to argue. The few $100s did not matter, but the driver was driving them crazy. Wilbur was irritated too. Who the hell did the driver think he was? He instantly said, "I don't have a single penny on me today. What can you do about it?" "What can I do? I told you earlier, when my bros get here, the price will be a lot higher. said the driver with a menacing face. Wilbur laughed and shook his head. He said, "Fine. Call your bros. Let's see what they're made of." Chapter 340. The driver was triggered. He thought, "This guy is tough, but I have to make sure they are afraid. Otherwise, this will be a loss if I get fined over their report." However, he was not afraid because he had done that before. He instantly took out his phone and threatened coldly, "Just wait and see." Then, he made a phone call and blabbered for a while. He said, "My bros are not to be messed with. Don't say I didn't warn you." He had a few cronies who were also taxi drivers. They did dirty deeds like that all the time. They could get a lot of money by scamming, especially from foreigners. The profit they could make by scamming was worth a day's work. So they often helped each other out to scam people. They would choose the weaker ones, of course, such as couples like Wilbur and Nancy. Those who were unmarried tend to settle the issue by paying up. He did not have the courage to scam any of the stronger-looking men. Wilbur sneered coldly. He did not want to acknowledge him, so he sent a message to Elsa instead. He told her what happened and to bring someone over. The driver would never dare to trouble Nancy in the future, no matter how audacious he was if the authorities were involved. Wilbur did that to prevent future troubles. At the same time, he was also trying to punish the driver. He wanted to let the driver be wary of scamming someone else in the future. Soon, 4 taxis arrived. 4 drivers immediately surrounded Wilbur and Nancy. A few of them asked aggressively, "What happened, Zed?" The driver, known as Zed, immediately replied, "These 2 won't pay for the ride." Actually, they knew what happened. They instantly became aggressive as they rolled their sleeves up like they were going to hit them. Wilbur protected Nancy behind him. The driver named Zed saw that and sneered. He said, "Dude, you can settle this with just $500 now." "Oh, how much do you want then?" asked Wilbur nonchalantly. Zed pointed at his companions and said loudly, "We have 5 cabs in total. The compensation for the delay is $2,000, and the gas money is another $500. That's $2,500 in total. Not a penny less." "2,500? Are you an idiot?" Wilbur teased. Zed was immediately pissed off when he heard that. He rolled his sleeves up and warned, "Dude, you're just asking for trouble." Wilbur chuckled and said, "Fine. I'll pay. Don't push your luck." Zed looked pleased because he was about to earn $2,500. He would have $2,100 left when he paid the 4 taxi drivers $100 each. He felt like he was going to make bank that night. Wilbur took his phone out to transfer the money, but the driver stopped him. The driver took his phone out and said, "Transfer it to my phone instead." "Sure thing." Wilbur wanted to leave evidence, so he did not hesitate to transfer $2,500 to him. The driver sneered and said, "We've been around Seachertown for over a decade. No one dares to not pay for their rides. You better watch yourself from now on." Then, the driver waved. They scolded Wilbur while they smugly got into their cabs to leave. However, Wilbur said in a cold tone, "Hold it. What is it? What do you want?" asked Zed as he turned around to look at Wilbur. Wilbur sneered and said, "You're trying to leave after scamming my money? Aren't you guys just delusional?" "What do you mean by that, dude?" asked Zed maliciously. Wilbur said nonchalantly, "Stop pretending to be evil. I've seen evil men. You guys are more like evil bitches." "Bros, this dude called us bitches," yelled Zed. The drivers also turned around and surrounded Wilbur again. They looked menacing. One of them even had a wooden stick and he waved it in front of Wilbur. Nancy sighed and shook her head. Those guys were about to face a world of pain. Suddenly, a few criminal investigation department vehicles drifted by and parked next to the taxi. A car from the traffic police followed closely behind. Chapter 341. Zed and his cronies watched the incoming vehicles in disbelief. They were not afraid of the special agents, but the traffic police were their worst nightmare. They would be punished if they got caught. However, he had a relative who was working for the traffic police, so he was not too scared. He had been reported twice, but his relative would take care of the cases for him. Elsa brought along more than 10 special agents. They charged toward the taxi drivers and surrounded them. "I heard that someone is causing trouble here," Elsa looked at the drivers, chuckling as she said that. They instantly felt chills run down their spines. What happened? She asked again. Wilbur chuckled and told her everything. Elsa laughed after she heard that. She pointed at him and said, I can't believe this would happen to you. What are you saying? Know your place. You're a special agent, he grumbled. She did not mean to make fun of him. She only thought it was funny that the drivers messed with the wrong person. Why must they provoke Wilbur of all people? Then, she looked at the drivers and asked sternly, what happened? He won't pay for the ride, Zed stuttered. He felt tongue-tied and uncertain. She sneered and asked, oh yeah? Why did I hear that you were scamming, threatening, and causing trouble instead? That's not true. Zed denied it in a hurry. That was a serious crime, and he could be sentenced to months in jail. Two officers got out of the traffic police vehicle. The leader looked at Elsa when they arrived at the scene and said, Chief Janai, are these the taxis? Yes. I received a report that these taxis were scamming people through false meter readings, and they're suspected of extortion too, she replied. The person in charge of the traffic police immediately ordered his men, confiscate these taxis. We'll bring them back for investigation. Zed and the drivers panicked. Their meters were indeed tampered with. They would be caught once the investigation started. Zed hurriedly approached the officer in a friendly manner and said, Bro, please spare us. My cousin is Godfrey Zed of the West City District Traffic Police. You guys are colleagues, so please spare us for his sake. Is that so? Asked the officer coldly. Zed hurriedly said, It's true. I'll tell him to call you if you don't believe me. That's not necessary. I'll talk to him later, he replied in an unfriendly manner. Zed was taken aback because he did not know what the officer meant. Elsa laughed and said, Look closely, dude. This is the person in charge of the Seachertown Traffic Police. He'll talk to your cousin later and have a really good chat with him. Huh? Zed was stunned. He could never imagine in his wildest dreams that a big shot was involved in such a trifling case. His cousin was only an ordinary employee of the traffic police, far beneath the officer in front of him. He was a cunning man, so he was smart enough to know they wanted to investigate his cousin. He was so scared that he was sweating bullets when he thought of that. He also started to tremble. The other drivers were also scared out of their wits. The person in charge of the traffic police was there. Did they just break some sort of inviolable law or something? They were not aware that the person in charge of any department was one call away because of Elsa. She was not only the chief of the criminal investigation department, but she was also the niece of Orrin Campbell. Her status was no joke. She smiled and said, Thanks, Sonny. You guys get the vehicles, and I'll handle the suspects. I'll take them back for interrogation to check if they broke any other laws. All right. We'll send someone for investigation too if the meters were tampered with. Please cooperate with us, Chief Janai, said Sonny. She laughed and said, Sure, I'll cooperate fully. Zed and his companions finally realized they were in big trouble. Zed panicked and knelt in front of Wilbur. He sobbed and said, Bro, I'm sorry. Please tell them to spare me. Life isn't easy for people like us. Chapter 342. Wilbur said in a low voice, Are you saying it's fine to scam others because life isn't easy? I transferred $2,500 to you. If I was someone weaker or more cowardly, I'd be scammed by you guys, right? Zed cried and apologized. I was wrong. I'll give you back the money. So please spare me. People like you won't change if no one teaches you a lesson. Accept the fact that you're unfortunate this time, so you won't scam other people in the future, said Wilbur nonchalantly. Elsa ordered sternly, Take them away. The special agents arrested Zed and the other drivers under her orders. They were brought back to the station. Vehicles from the traffic police also arrived to confiscate the taxis. Sonny said goodbye to Elsa as he glanced at Wilbur. He remembered what Wilbur looked like. Sonny did not know who Wilbur was, but he was able to summon Elsa and make her call Sonny. By that logic, he was definitely not as simple as he seemed. The special agents and the officers left. Elsa looked at Wilbur and Nancy, then teased them. Bro, are you on a date? Come on now. This is my classmate. Wilbur glared at Elsa. She jokes just like Farron when no one is around, Wilbur thought. Nancy blushed and told Elsa, Thank you, Chief Janai. You're welcome. I won't disturb you lovebirds then. Goodbye. Elsa joked as she smiled and turned to leave. Wilbur hurriedly said, "Take me with you." Nancy waved goodbye as Wilbur got into the car. They drove towards Sea Lake Island. "I'm so sorry to disturb you and that classmate of yours. She looks good," said Elsa. Wilbur looked displeased. He said, "Say nonsense like that again and I'll knock your teeth off. Got it?" "Fine. I'll stop." His threats were quite scary, so she did not dare to tease him anymore. She focused on driving instead. They arrived at Sea Lake Island, and they walked on the bridge. Suddenly, Wilbur said, "Don't tell Faye." "It's nothing, actually. It's just my class reunion, but I'm scared she'll misunderstand." "Well, well, well. I can't believe you're actually scared of something. This is unbelievable. Simply astonishing." She kept shaking her head in disbelief. Her sarcasm made him want to punch her in the face, but he said, "Whatever. I was about to teach you a few moves from my godly training form." "Bro, I won't say a word. My loyalty to you is undeniable." She immediately swore to the sky. "His combat skills are no joke. They are incredible. I desired this for so long, and I'm finally getting my shot. I can't miss it for the world," Elsa thought to herself. Wilbur scoffed coldly and said, "It depends on what you do next." Then, he went straight back to his room. She sighed deeply and muttered to herself, "He got me good." The next morning, Wilbur woke up and washed up. He went to the living room and thought about something before he smiled. Then, he went out and drove toward a hotel. He arrived at the door of a suite soon and he began to knock. Someone answered the door after a moment. "It's time to depart." "Bro, are we going for real? What do you think?" "No, wait. I feel like it's very dangerous also. That place is the territory of the Ant clan. You know the Ant clan, right? They are not easy to deal with."